If you ever find yourself in Half-Life's Black Mesa after the Resonant Cascade, you'll inevitably find yourself face to face with the Sonocanus myriops. That is the taxonomic name for the Houndeye. In most video games, this would just be a basic obstacle that players need to overcome. But in Half-Life, there's a lot more thought into making these guys feel like living creatures. Like, they're social animals that hunt in packs, which means that by themselves they're a little more timid, but in battle they'll gain their confidence and follow the leader. They're able to emit sonic waves, and the color of the wave and the strength of it is dependent on the amount of Houndeye present. They're also able to communicate with each other using these high-pitched noises. And these omnivores feast on their prey using this beak-like mouth on the underside of their belly. Half-Life and its sequel are full of unnecessary but cool ecological details, whether it's the social hierarchy of the antlions or the hunting behavior of the bull squid. And today I want to see how these creatures interact with each other and see if they actually make up a functioning ecosystem. And to do that, I've studied real-world ecology to see how our environments actually are on Earth. And I'm going to compare that to the ecosystems found in Half-Life 1 and 2. So let's stop wasting time and make our first stop in Half-Life Xen. So to figure out if Xen has an ecosystem, we first need to define what an ecosystem actually is. For the sake of this video, we're just going to look at the broader concepts at play because Half-Life's just a video game and it's honestly not that deep. Essentially, an ecosystem is really defined by the way animals interact with each other in their community and their environment. And typically in each area, you'll find an energy flow from the producers to prey to predators. You'll also find decomposers as well, but that's not really the focus of this video. So to understand how these creatures interact with each other, we first need to understand what type of climate Xen actually has. And we can find our first major clue about what animals survive on Xen by looking at this. This is a head crab, which can survive on both Xen and Earth, which means that considering it survives on Earth, there has to be breathable oxygen on Xen. Xen doesn't appear to have any major weather patterns, and there's no in-game evidence of the temperature here. And so to determine the climate of Xen, I want to look at the bull squid, and I want to see what kind of animals might have inspired it and see what areas they live at on Earth, and then use that information to determine the climate of Xen. The bull squid seems to take inspiration from a bunch of different animals, but there's two main animals that I want to talk about. The first one is the star-nosed mole, and you can see how their faces visually look kind of similar. And the other one is the kimono dragon. The bull squid is bipedal, but it has toxic spit similar to the kimono dragon. And considering the skin of a bull squid is likely to be slimy and reptilian, they're probably going to survive in warm, damp environments. And so using that information, I think Xen is probably a damp and warm environment. So now that we have a rough idea of what the climate is, we can see what type of creatures evolved to survive on Xen. And we can use that information to determine if this area has a functioning ecosystem. Except there's still one more problem. As far as I'm aware, life did not actually evolve to survive on Xen. You see, all of the creatures I've talked about here so far have actually been teleported here from their own homeworlds, which means this ecosystem is artificially created. And that now leaves us with two problems to solve. Is this place an ecosystem? And is this place a sustainable ecosystem? So to see if it's sustainable, let's track the flow of energy from producers to prey to predators. Considering we don't actually have a ton of information to go off of, I'm gonna guess these weird tentacle trees and spore bulbs are likely the main autotrophs of this ecosystem. The trees here have some kind of self-defense mechanism, which can also be seen on some trees on Earth as well. A lot of plants have spikes to defend themselves, and even something like the black walnut tree can actually release toxins if it detects plants near it. Maybe the Xen trees have a root-like system that can detect when something steps on top of them. A lot of Xen also kind of reminds me a bit of an underwater ecosystem. Unfortunately, Xen is made up of a lot of abstract low-resolution textures, so determining what this environment is made up of is pretty difficult. Maybe this is a type of weird alien coral. Maybe inside of it are microscopic zooxanthellae that are photosynthesizing. There's really no way to confirm that, but it's kind of fun to consider. I think a lot of the fun of looking at video game ecosystems is a lot of it is for us to determine. And who knows, Xen may not even have to abide by Earth rules. Maybe something that is a producer is very different in this type of ecosystem. Now let's talk about the predators and prey of Xen, because I think there's a lot more in-game behavior to show you. Now, one of the cool things about Half-Life is creatures will seek out other creatures to attack and eat. Even the little roaches you can find around the Black Mesa facility will crawl around until they find something to snack on. But back to Xen wildlife, because I want to talk about the head crab, because these guys are really strange little creatures. You've clicked on a Half-Life video, you know that they can attach to human heads and turn them into zombie-like creatures. This transformation could be a part of some strange reproductive process, but I don't really see enough about their in-game reproductive cycle to support this. We do see baby head crabs coming out of the gonar, but we don't really have any information of how a head crab goes from this all the way to this. This is just speculation, but I think zombification might be the way head crabs actually feed. In Half-Life 2, we see that when their teeth are removed, they typically eat watermelons or soft foods. Maybe they lack organs to be able to process a lot of the nutrients that they need to survive. So they rely on the host body to handle that nutrients processing. I don't know. There's really not a lot of information on this. It's just speculation. Now, let's talk about the bull squid. These funny looking fellas, when they're not hunting Gordon down, will use their spit or their strong tails to attack head crabs. Now in this video, I'd like to focus on their interactions with other creatures, but I do think it's worth noting that their skin may be a form of camouflage. Headcrabs don't have eyes, but again, these creatures aren't native to Xen. Maybe this camouflage helped them survive on their own planet. Another interesting creature of Xen is probably these weird flying creatures and the Nihilanth. I really hope that's how you say that. This fetus-esque creature is able to control a bunch of different animals, including these flying creatures, through some kind of mind control. Maybe their mind-controlling powers can connect and transfer through these guys. In real nature, you can find hive minds through something like ants, where they emit different pheromones that they can communicate what is going on in the colony. So that makes me want to ask the scientific question, is Nihilanth ant? Yes! No. Considering the Nihilanth is controlling the Vortigaunts through dimensions, it's likely some kind of just sci-fi mind control. But I do think that it shows how Half-Life handles ecology. Sometimes it's just raw alien creatures, and in other ways it's about how intelligent species kind of conquest species for their own gains. I want to explore that a bit more in the Half-Life 2 segment, but before I do that, let's figure out if Xen is actually an ecosystem. Unfortunately, the rushed development of Xen kind of means that a lot of it is a bit underbaked. So I've had to do a lot of speculative guesswork on the ecology so far. And that kind of means that I think Xen isn't exactly an ecosystem. In game, it may not even be trying to be one either, considering it's a bunch of animals teleported here from their own worlds. And maybe that's a better way to represent Xen. It has aspects of an ecosystem, but it isn't actually a functioning one. But it's missing a lot of what I'd want to see in a virtual ecosystem. So now let's talk about Half-Life 2 and see if the extra development time and processing power actually led to a better ecosystem. One thing that makes Half-Life 2's ecosystem a little easier to analyze is that City 17 and the surrounding areas take place on Earth. While in-game the city takes place vaguely in Eastern Europe, a lot of people have speculated that the actual city is Sofia, Bulgaria. And going off of that, we can determine quite a lot about the local ecosystem. Bulgaria as a whole has 4 pretty distinct seasons, with hot summers in the 18 to 31 degree range and cold winters getting into the negative degrees. This means that animals that hibernate, like the Eurasian brown bear, or animals that can survive cold and warm weather, like the gray wolf or golden jackal, can live in this area. However, Half-Life 2's big twist on ecology is the Combine, and their effect on the local ecosystem. The Combine's extraction of Earth's resources have left it fragmented and transformed. So what we should be really looking for is if Half-Life 2 represents what a collapsed ecosystem would look like. The major species that could survive a post-collapse ecosystem would need to be common, useless to the Combine, able to survive harsh conditions, and survive off of scarce food and other creatures that would also still be alive. And one of those animals happens to be a pigeon. We're about to talk about the ecology of birds. These common pigeons are actually rock doves, and are found in many places on Earth, including Bulgaria. A common predator of pigeons are cats, which aren't seen in Half-Life 2, but are seen in Half-Life Alyx. You can also find crows and seagulls throughout Half-Life 2. The crows are low fidelity, but they sort of look like the carrion crow to me because of the way their feathers are shaped at the tip of their wings. Crows tend to hang out in farms, cities, or other places where humans live. Funnily enough, they'll also compete with gulls for food. Most of the bird behavior in Half-Life is designed around being set pieces for the environments. Considering most of these games are linear, you're never really given the opportunity to follow them around. So they mostly fly around preset locations and do bird stuff. Amazing observation! Now let's pivot over from real animals to Xen creatures, because I want to see how they're surviving on Earth. Due to the Combine's actions, there must be major ecological collapse of established ecosystems. So when you see large disruptions to the environment, there'll likely be new niches for predators to fill. And one of the major niches you've seen filled are barnacles. They're kind of a pest in this world. The barnacle is an ambush predator that waits for their prey to get caught on these dangling tongues. One thing I've always wondered about the barnacle is how do they reproduce, considering they're not able to move on their own? And we might be able to find our answer by looking at real-world barnacles. One of the ways that these guys reproduce is with their extremely long penises, which means that these tongues might not be tongues at all. Ugh. However, in Half-Life Alyx, we find our answer. Barnacles are able to reproduce by spreading spores that grow into another barnacle somehow, which I guess is kind of similar to how plants kind of spit out pollen everywhere, and it may just be something that's just alien to us. I think a lot of what we see in Half-Life 2 is actually pretty consistent with how an ecosystem looks after collapse. The surviving creatures are mostly generalists that can pretty much eat anything, or creatures that can breed quickly and work together, like the antlion. As their name suggests, these are indeed lion-sized ants. And they came from the same planet that the Vortigaunts came from. Apparently they used to hunt the antlions for their larval nectar. Antlions also have an extensive nesting structure and a eusocial hierarchical structure. When you first run into them, you're initially warned about the spawning season that's making them more aggressive. These guys obviously take real inspiration from the real-life antlion. Like for example, you can see in this footage how real larval waits to ambush their prey. However, their reliance on the vibration makes them easy prey for the barnacle because they hang on ceilings and thus leave no vibrations. Antlions are blind too, so working together is essential for their survival. And they're so effective at what they do that they can often wipe out the entirety of a native species when they get into a zone, or kill the greatest mind of our generation. So far, I think Half-Life 2 does a really good job of simulating a collapsed ecosystem through its limited set pieces. But there's also another cool thing it does with its ecosystem, the synths. These semi-mechanized life forms are combined synthetic recreations of animals from another planet. The Striders are redesigned to have cannons and armored bodies. The carriers have rotors near its tail and pulse guns underneath its head. There's a lot of different versions of synths in this game, but I think the thing they really serve in this game is representing what video game enemies actually are. They're recreations of living organisms designed around one task, which is literally what all of the animals in Half-Life ultimately need to do: attack the player or give them an obstacle to overcome. I do think in some ways they have some scary similarities to how we use animals in real life. And that kind of leads me to one of the biggest horrors of Half-Life 2, the reconstruction of our world and the destruction of so much of our wildlife. Like, look at these horse statues for a moment. To the future generations of this world, the horse may be just an icon of a world they'll never know. In Half-Life Alyx, Alex has never heard of turkeys, cattle, or pigs. So much of what we are currently taking for granted in our world eradicated because the Combine conquered Earth and deemed those animals non-essential. I'm not sure if Valve was directly trying to comment on this fact, but I do think that the Combine are a perfect example of what happens when a society only sees the world as resources to be extracted. And while our current real-world situation obviously isn't as bad as Half-Life, there is an urgent need to take the preservations of ecosystems seriously. And if the people of Half-Life can fight for their world, so can we.
Video complete.